Have you ever felt like faith is supposed to be more than just, a passive waiting game? Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful idea from Joshua Prince Onoweli. It's all about a mandate for believers to start actively using the authority they've been given.
I mean, right there, that single idea really challenges how a lot of us might think about faith. It's suggesting a huge shift, moving from this kind of defensive crouch to actively enforcing a victory that, get this, has already been won.
So the central message for 2026, based on this text, is really a call to action. It's about moving from a place of fear to a place of power. But you gotta ask, right? Where does this authority even come from? Well, the source points us to a very specific promise.
In this whole concept, it isn't something new. The foundation for it is actually rooted in a promise that Jesus himself made in the book of Mark. We're talking about a promise of real supernatural power and protection.
Now, the source argues that we're not just talking about symbolic language here. The logic is, if the part about healing the sick is meant to be taken literally, then the part about protection should be too, right? But, and this is super important, this power comes with a really critical distinction about how it's supposed to be used.
Yeah, this authority, it's not for showing off, it's not a party trick. There is a huge, vital difference between using it for its actual intended purpose, its divine assignment, and just using it for some kind of reckless display to prove your faith.
So the distinction couldn't be clearer. On one side, you've got the whole tempting God for a spectacle thing, the very thing Jesus himself rejected. And on the other side, you've got this divine protection that kicks in when you're actually on assignment, doing what you're called to do. One is all about ego, the other is all about obedience.
Okay, so what does this authority actually look like in a real-life situation? When that unexpected crisis just hits you out of nowhere. Well, the source gives us a perfect case study from the life of the Apostle Paul.
So picture this. The scene is pretty simple. Paul is just gathering sticks to build a fire. And then, bam! Out of nowhere, a venomous viper latches onto his hand. Everyone watching is just waiting for him to swell up and drop dead. But what does Paul do? He just shakes the snake off into the fire, completely unharmed.
Think about his reaction for a second. There was no panic, no screaming, no frantic prayer, just calm confidence. And this, according to the source, is exactly the posture of someone who gets it, who understands they're operating in delegated authority when they face their own vipers, whether that's a sudden career blow or a huge personal crisis.
So where in the world does that kind of incredible confidence come from? Well, the source traces it all back to the believer's spiritual position. It's not about trying to earn power, it's about understanding the power you've already been given.
This verse from Luke is presented as the explicit proof, and you got to pay attention to the wording here. Behold, I give unto you power. It doesn't say I will use my power for you. It's a direct delegation of his power to believers for them to actually use.
And this brings us right to the core definition of the whole thing. Delegated authority is framed as a legal right. Think about that. The legal right to enforce heaven's victory right here on earth. And the source connects this to the book of Ephesians, explaining that the power that's available to believers, it's the exact same power that raised Christ from the dead. The same power that seated him in the highest place of authority and put all things under his feet. That's a lot of power.
And that leads to a really powerful conclusion, doesn't it? The source states that if believers are spiritually seated with Christ in that same position of authority, then living in fear or just accepting defeat, well, it just doesn't line up with that reality.
Okay, so that's the theology, the why behind it. But what does this actually mean for you, practically speaking, in 2026? The source wraps this all up with a very direct call to action.
I mean, when you look at the commands in the New Testament as they're interpreted here, they aren't passive words at all. They're action words. Resist, rebuke, cast out, stand firm. The logic behind it is pretty powerful when you think about it. Why would you keep asking God to do something when He's already given you the authority to act?
And this really brings the whole concept into sharp focus. Authority ignored is authority wasted. It's only when you actually exercise that authority that its reality is proven.
And so the source leaves us with this final, really challenging question. It's designed to shift our focus from just asking to actually acting. The question for you is pretty simple. Are you going to keep asking for the authority you've already been given, or are you going to start to use it?